Hey guys, tonight we delve into a side of the Wild West you've probably never pictured. A world far removed from the high noon duels and daring train robberies that usually gallop through your imagination. We're exploring the surprisingly unglamorous, paper-strewn reality of a frontier sheriff's daily life. Picture this: the sun, a hesitant smear of apricot and rose, just beginning to silhouette the jagged peaks in the far distance, the air still carrying the cool, dry breath of the desert. Night. Your office, a small, timber-framed box smelling faintly of old paper, dust, and the lingering ghost of yesterday's coffee awaits its daily master. Forget the quick-draw practice. Your first battle of the day is with a mountain of ledgers and letters. Honestly, with the amount of meticulous record-keeping required, you probably wouldn't survive this as a 19th century sheriff if your penmanship was worse than your aim. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment letting us know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first conscious thought that filters through the haze of sleep isn't about outlaws or posses. It's the insistent ache in your lower back, a familiar greeting from the thin straw mattress that serves as your bed in the small room attached to the sheriff's office. You swing your legs over the side, the rough-hewn wooden floorboards, cold beneath your bare feet. Outside, the pre-dawn silence of Redemption Gulch, or whatever fittingly rugged name your patch of dirt happens to bear, as broken only by the distant, mournful cry of a coyote and the occasional rustle of a tumbleweed, skittering down Main Street like a lost thought. It's a quiet that presses in, vast and a little lonely. You stretch, a series of pops and cracks accompanying the movement, the body's natural percussion section warming up for the day. No luxurious snooze button here. The internal clock, honed by seasons of early patrols and earlier troubles, is unforgiving. You move to the washstand. A simple wooden affair holding a chipped porcelain basin and a pitcher of water that's invariably colder than you'd like. As you splash your face, the chill is a sharp, effective summons to full alertness. Shaving is a careful, deliberate process with a straight razor that you keep meticulously sharp. One of the few concessions to personal grooming that time and circumstance allow. There's no artisanal beard balm in your toolkit, no carefully curated mustache wax. This is function over form, a necessity rather than a statement. You eye your reflection in the small, slightly warped mirror. It's a face that's seen too much sun in the summer and too much wind in the winter, etched with the fine lines of responsibility. Dressing is equally straightforward. Durable trousers, a long-sleeved cotton shirt, sturdy boots that have molded to your feet through miles of walking dusty streets and rocky trails. The famous tin star is pinned to your vest, a small weight that feels disproportionately heavy some mornings. You forego coffee for now. The pot-bellied stove in the main office needs tending first, and the ritual of making coffee is a small solace. You prefer to conduct once the official day has begun. It's a small act of domesticity, a quiet rebellion against the ruggedness demanded by your role. For a man whose life is so often about public order, these private, unobserved moments are a necessary bomb. You step out of your Spartan quarters and into the office proper. The air here is thick with the scent of old paper, a dry, almost sweet aroma mingled with the faint metallic temps of ink and the underlying earthiness of the dirt that inevitably finds its way in. It's not the heroic aroma of saddle leather and gun smoke that the dime novels might suggest. This is the scent of bureaucracy, Wild West edition. Your desk, a sturdy oak construction, is already a landscape of documents, not a pristine, organized landscape, mind you, more like a mountain range sculpted by an overworked deity of documentation. There are stacks of warrants, neatly tied with string, piles of incoming correspondence from other territories, from concerned citizens, from the ever-demanding territorial marshal. Ledger books, their covers worn smooth with use, lay open, waiting for the day's entries. Historians still argue whether the average frontier sheriff spent more time enforcing laws or fulfilling bureaucratic duties for the county. But as you survey your desk, you'd bet on the latter. Your first task is to bring some light to the scene. You unlatch the heavy wooden shutters, the creak of their hinges loud in the stillness. Pale morning light, still shy and grey, filters in, illuminating the floating dust motes, tiny, dancing constellations in your own private universe of responsibility. If it's a colder morning, you'll turn your attention to the stove, clearing out yesterday's ashes and carefully laying new kindling. The smell of wood smoke soon joins the office's unique olfactory signature. Then, to the paperwork itself. You don't dive in immediately. Instead, you perform a sort of preliminary survey, a general reconnaissance of the enemy's positions. A new wanted poster, its ink still looking remarkably fresh, depicts a man with shifty eyes and a regrettable haircut, another soul to keep an eye out for. A letter from a concerned rancher details missing livestock, complete with a hand-drawn map of dubious accuracy. You make a mental note. This will require a ride out later, and probably a lot of tactful questioning. It's amazing how many disputes could be solved if people just learned to draw better maps, or perhaps communicate without instantly suspecting their neighbor of grand larceny over a stray cow. You pick up a new directive from the territorial capital, printed on that slightly stiff, off-white paper that always feels terribly official. It's likely an update to some obscure regulation or a demand for yet another report. The sheer volume of paper used in the administration of justice is a minor marvel. Much of it was Argentina, a term that sounds rather exotic, but actually referred to paper made from cotton and linen rags. This rag paper was prized for its durability, essential for documents that needed to last, unlike the more brittle wood pulp paper that would become common later. Imagine trying to file a land claim on something that disintegrated faster than a snowball in July. You might find a peculiar document too, like a formal complaint about Mrs. Henderson's prize-winning rooster crowing at an unseemly hour. Some towns had truly bizarre ordinances, covering everything from the permissible speed of galloping down Main Street to regulations on where one could tether their pig. There's a quirky tidbit for you. Some communities even had ordinances. Can you imagine the paperwork involved in processing that particular misdemeanor? Suspect did knowingly and with provocative intent tip his hat in a manner suggesting admiration. It's enough to make you want to turn in your badge and become a contemplative hermit before the town properly stirs, before the first petitioners or complainants arrive with their daily litany of woes. This quiet hour is yours. It's a time for mental preparation, for girding your loins with ink and resolve. You sharpen a couple of pencils with your pocket knife. Check the ink level in the well on your desk, and ensure there's a fresh supply of blotting sand, or, if you're fancy, actual blotting paper, ready to prevent your careful script from becoming an indecipherable smudge. The quiet of these early moments is a precious commodity, soon to be spent in the currency of shouts, demands, and the endless rustle of official forms. The sun is climbing, and soon the surprising mundanity of your paper-filled day will begin in earnest. The rhythmic tap-tap-tapping of your pencil against the scarred oak of your desk is a quiet counterpoint to the slow brightening of the world outside your window. You've just finished reviewing the notes from yesterday. A reminder about that loose boardwalk plank on Commerce Street. A query about overdue fines from Silas Blackwood, the blacksmith whose ability to pay seemed to rust away with his tools. It's just as you're reaching for the first of the many forms that require your meticulous attention that a familiar sound breaks the morning's relative calm. It's the distinct rumble and jingle of the overland stage. Still a good few minutes out, but its imminent arrival sends a small ripple through the town, and through your own anticipatory senses. The stagecoach, often a Wells Fargo & Co. Concorde, is more than just a vehicle. It's the town's artery, pumping in news, new faces, and, most pertinent to your current existence, the mail. You glance at the Seth Thomas clock on the wall, its pendulum swinging with hypnotic regularity, right on time, or as on time as anything ever gets out here, where schedules are more aspiration than affirmation. You continue your current task, addressing an envelope for a reply to a county commissioner, your quill scratching with a sound, like tiny claws on slate. There's no point rushing to the door. The postmaster, old Jedediah Plum, a man whose pace makes a contemplative snail look like a sprinter, will take his sweet time sorting everything at the Wells Fargo depot before making his rounds. Jedediah is a character, a walking repository of town gossip, filtered through a benign sort of deafness that conveniently allows him to ignore anything he deems too troublesome. He's also, bless his cotton socks, remarkably reliable when it comes to the actual delivery of letters. About 20 minutes later, just as you're considering if the coffee brewing on the potbelly stove has reached a state of potent perfection, or merely lukewarm disappointment, a daily gamble, that a shadow falls across your doorway. "Mornin', Sheriff." Jedediah stands there, his spectacles perched precariously on the end of his nose, a weathered leather satchel slung across his chest. It's not so much a pouch as a small, battered valise, looking like it's been through a few too many dust storms and perhaps a minor disagreement with a badger. Jedediah, you nod, offering a faint smile. "What news from the civilized world?" He chuckles, a dry, rustling sound. "Civilized? Debatable, Sheriff. Highly debatable. More paper for your collection is what it is." He hefts the satchel. Feels like a heavy one today. Either someone's written a novel, or the government's invented a new form. My bet's on the form. That's the first light joke of the morning, and you offer a wry smile in return. He's probably right. He ambles in and deposits the satchel on the corner of your desk with a soft thud. The smell of road dust and old leather briefly overpowers the familiar scent of ink and paper in your office. "Anything urgent looking in there, Jed?" You ask, though you know he rarely peeks. "Hard to say, Sheriff. Sealed is sealed, though there's a rather official-looking one with a fancy red seal from the territorial capital. Probably just want to know if we've all learned to fly yet." He winks, then shuffles out, already thinking of his next stop, leaving you to the archaeological dig that is the US mail. You undo the worn buckles of the satchel. The contents are a jumble, thick envelopes, thin ones, rolled newspapers tied with string, and the ever-present official-looking documents. This is the lifeline, the connection to the world beyond the county line, and also, frequently, the source of your biggest headaches. It's a far cry from today's instant messaging. Back then, waiting a week, or even a month, for a reply to an urgent query was standard. You can almost hear your great-great-grandchildren complaining if their text message isn't answered in 30 seconds. Your first pass is a quick sort. Personal letters, if any, are set aside. Newspapers, like the Cheyenne Daily Leader, or perhaps a local, if less reliable, news sheet printed on someone's rickety hand press, are also momentarily deferred. Your focus is on the official correspondence. You pick up the letter Jedediah mentioned, the one with the impressive crimson wax seal. It looks important, or at least it wants to look important. The paper is thick, creamy, and the handwriting, if you can call the elaborate calligraphy that is almost aggressively ornate. These official communications often seemed to be written with the unspoken assumption that the more curlicue a letter had, the more weight it carried. Then there are the circulars, the 19th century equivalent of a mass email, usually detailing new regulations, warnings about counterfeit currency, or, most commonly, descriptions of wanted men. These get pinned to the already crowded bulletin board, a patchwork quilt of faded faces and reward offers. You scan a new one, wanted for horse theft and general nagoodery. One Slim Perkins. The description is vague, tallish, thinnish, mean-looking, helpful as ever. You sometimes wonder if these descriptions ever actually lead to an arrest, or if they just give imaginative folks someone new to think they saw at the saloon. Interspersed are requests from other sheriffs or marshals. Information requested regarding one John Q. Drifter, last seen heading your way. These require careful consideration and, invariably, a written reply adding to your own outgoing paper mountain. Sometimes, a letter might contain a desperate plea from a citizen in an unorganized territory, someone falling through the cracks of jurisdiction, hoping a sheriff, any sheriff, will take an interest in their plight. A stolen locket, a missing son, a swindled land claim. These are the hardest, as your authority often ends at the county line. But your conscience doesn't. There's a mainstream historical fact for you: the efficiency and reach of mail services, like those provided by Wells Fargo, were absolutely critical to the functioning of the West. They weren't just carrying letters. They were carrying instructions, legal documents, money, and the very fabric of governance and commerce, connecting isolated settlements over vast distances. It was the information superhighway of its day, albeit one that traveled at the speed of a good horse or a sturdy stagecoach. As you sort, you might come across something truly unexpected. Perhaps an envelope that feels oddly lumpy. It's a quirky, if somewhat unsettling, tidbit that people back then occasionally tried to mail the strangest things. While the Postal Service had regulations, enforcement in remote areas could be spotty. You wouldn't be entirely shocked to find a small, poorly packaged geological sample, or perhaps a dried plant someone thought was a medical marvel. Thankfully, today it's just an unusually thick sheaf of documents from a federal land agent, likely detailing some new surveying complication that will undoubtedly involve you in mediating between irate settlers. Historians still argue whether the expansion of telegraph lines truly diminished the importance of postal correspondence for everyday governance in remote Western territories during the late 19th century. The telegraph was faster, no doubt, for urgent, concise messages. But for the detailed reports, the lengthy legal arguments, the nuanced discussions, and the sheer volume of routine administrative traffic, paper mail, with its ability to convey bulk and permanence, remained indispensable. Each letter, each form, Each directive you now hold is a testament to that. You begin to make a pile of items requiring immediate action, another for those that can wait a day or two, and a third for things you wish could wait indefinitely, like the meticulously detailed 20-page questionnaire from the Census Bureau. The sheer variety is daunting, from a request to track down a witness for a trial 3 states away, to a politely phrased but firm reminder about an overdue report. On county expenditures, each piece of paper represents a task, a responsibility, a thread in the complex web of keeping even a remote semblance of order. The sun is higher now, and the sounds of the town waking up, a dog barking, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, distant voices begin to filter in. Your quiet morning is officially over. The postmaster's pouch has delivered not just mail, but your agenda for the day, and likely the rest of the week. With the morning mail now sorted into teetering piles of descending urgency, a fresh wave of responsibility washes over your desk. The scent of distant lands carried on the envelopes fades, replaced by the more immediate and somehow more intimidating aroma of old leather bindings and the slightly acidic tang of account book paper. It's time to face the ledgers. These aren't just books. They're monolithic testaments to fiscal rectitude, or at least the attempt at it. Each one is bound in thick, scuffed leather, the kind that seems to absorb the gravity of its contents. Opening one feels less like starting a task and more like unsealing an ancient tome filled with cryptic financial spells. You half expect a puff of dust and a disembodied voice to intone, "Who dares disturb the sacred scrolls of county funds?" You pull the largest ledger towards you, the general fund, its pages filled with columns of spidery handwriting, a veritable tapestry of income and expenditure. Your predecessor, a man whose penmanship looked like a chicken, had a seizure while holding a leaky quill. Thankfully, only left his mark on the first few pages. The rest is your own meticulous script, a small point of pride in this ocean of numbers. This is where the real nitty-gritty of your paper-filled day kicks into high gear. A far cry from the romanticized gallop across the plains. You're wrestling with numbers, not rustlers, and honestly, some days the numbers feel more stubborn. The first order of business is logging any revenue that's come in. Perhaps yesterday, young Timmy Henderson finally paid his fine for discharging a firearm within town limits. He swore he was aiming at a particularly aggressive hornet, not Mrs. Gable's prize-winning petunias, but the petunias bore silent, floral witness against him. That $2 fine, carefully recorded, now joins the county coffers. Then there are the fees for licenses. Bartholomew's Saloon just renewed its liquor license. A hefty $50 that helps keep the county solvent, or at least less insolvent. You also issued a marriage license to that young couple who looked entirely too happy and optimistic for this dusty corner of the world. Their $1 fee now officially contributes to the civic good. It's a strange thought that the machinery of government here, from your salary to the very paper you're writing on, is partly funded by love and liquor. It's a mainstream historical fact that many frontier counties operated on incredibly tight budgets. Sheriffs were often the primary financial officers in practice, responsible for collecting a myriad of small sums and dispersing them with what was often minimal direct oversight. Your personal integrity and the accuracy of these very ledgers were all that stood between solvency and scandal. No pressure, right? Just the financial well-being of an entire county resting on your ability to make sure every last penny is accounted for, even the ones that seem determined to vanish into thin air like a politician's promise. Next, you turn to expenditures. Your own salary, A modest sum that never quite feels adequate for the headaches involved needs to be noted. Then there's the pay for your deputy, if you're lucky enough to have one. A man who hopefully earns his keep by being more than just another mouth to feed from the county's lean purse. The costs of maintaining the jail are a constant drain. So many pounds of beans, so many cords of wood for the stove in winter, the occasional repair to a door that some disgruntled guest tried to dismantle with his teeth. You make a mental note to order more lamp oil. The nights are drawing in, and paperwork by moonlight, while poetic sounding is murder on the eyes and the ink. You seem to go through rivers of it. You sometimes wonder if you should invest in a small ink-making enterprise on the side. Sheriff. Blackwood's patented incorruptible ink, guaranteed to outlast your patience with bureaucracy. It's got a ring to it. That's your second little joke to yourself, a necessary coping mechanism. Travel expenses also make an appearance. Last week's posse, the one that chased the horse thieves halfway to Nebraska territory, cost a pretty penny in provisions and horseflesh. Each receipt, painstakingly collected and often scribbled on scraps of paper that look like they've been used to mop up coffee spills, must be itemized. Historians still argue whether the fee system, prevalent in many areas, where sheriffs and other officials earned a portion of the fines and fees they collected, was a practical incentive to ensure diligent enforcement or an open invitation to creative accounting and potential corruption. Looking at the meager salary allocation in your ledger, you can certainly see why the fee system had its appeal, even if it also had its pitfalls. As you meticulously dip your pen, a modern steel nib, thankfully not a flighty quill that requires constant reshaping, and make your entries, you have to be incredibly careful. A misplaced decimal point, a transposed number, can throw everything off, leading to hours of frustrating detective work later on. It's like trying to defuse a bomb, but instead of wires, you have columns of figures, and if you cut the wrong one, the only explosion is in your stress levels. Sometimes you find an entry from a previous month that makes absolutely no sense. Paid, Henderson, J-0.75 Gopher Eradication Services. You vaguely recall a plague of gophers undermining the church foundations and the subsequent bounty. It's a quirky tidbit of frontier life that the county budget had to account for such things, alongside murderers and tax evaders. Imagine trying to explain that line item to a visiting dignitary from back east. Yes, sir, our primary concerns are law, order, and subterranean rodents. The sheer variety of financial transactions that passed through a sheriff's office could be astounding, beyond the expected fines for drunkenness or theft. Some towns had truly unique ways of generating revenue or incurring expenses. You might uncover records of fines for leaving a horse unhitched, bathing in the town well, a surprisingly common offense in some parched locales, or even those almost mythical ugly laws in a few peculiar jurisdictions, where individuals deemed unsightly could technically be fined for appearing in public, though enforcement was, shall we say, rare and highly subjective. Thankfully, your town hasn't stooped to that level of civic fundraising. Balancing these books at the end of the month is a Herculean task. You often find yourself hunched over the ledger late into the night, the oil lamp casting flickering shadows on the page, your eyes burning, your brain feeling like a squeezed sponge. It's a solitary battle waged with columns of debits and credits, far from the heroic image of a lawman. Yet, this work is just as crucial. A county that can't manage its finances is a county ripe for chaos. These ledgers, in their own dry, unassuming way, are a cornerstone of the community, as vital as the jailhouse walls or the gavel in the circuit judge's hand. You sigh, dip your pen again, and continue to wrestle every dollar and docket into its proper place, one painstaking entry at a time. The heavy ledger of county finances is finally pushed to one side of your desk, though its invisible weight lingers in your shoulders. The numbers, for now, have been tamed, or at least temporarily corralled into their respective columns. You take a moment, perhaps, to stretch, to roll your neck, trying to work out the kinks that inevitably form when one spends hours hunched over accounts. The sun, climbing higher, now casts a brighter, more insistent light through your office window, illuminating the path to your next paper-based battle, the crafting of legal documents. This is where ink truly meets law and order, not with a bang, but with a careful, deliberate scratch of a nib on paper. You reach for a different stack of papers now. This one is a collection of hastily scribbled notes from citizen complaints, official requests from the justice of the peace, and your own observations jotted down during patrols or investigations. Each one represents a situation that requires a formal legal response, usually in the form of a warrant or a summons. It's a part of the job that consumes a surprising amount of your morning hours, demanding a different kind of focus than the ledgers, less about mathematical precision and more about the precise articulation of alleged wrongs and required actions. You can't just scrawl "go get Bill" on a piece of paper and call it a day, much as you might sometimes wish for that level of brevity. No, the law, even out here on the fringes of civilization, has its proper forms, and incantatio. NS, an arrest warrant, for instance, needs to be a model of clarity. You pull out a fresh sheet of sturdy paper, the kind reserved for official business, not the flimsy stuff used for idle figuring. You dip your pen into the inkwell, the dark liquid clinging to the steel nib. The mainstream historical fact is that while you, the sheriff, are the one who typically executes the warrants, it, making the arrest the actual legal authority to issue it, often rests with a justice of the peace or a judge. You'd present your evidence, your probable cause, to this magistrate, who would then, if satisfied, sign and seal the document, giving it the full force of law. Sometimes, if the JP is new or less experienced, you might find yourself assisting with the wording, drawing on your practical knowledge of what stands up to scrutiny and what DOESN 2. Today. Your first task is a warrant for a fellow named Cactus Jack McGee, according to a sworn complaint from Miller Abernathy, owner of the general store, Cactus Jack, in a fit of drunken pique over the price of tinned peaches, allegedly did willfully and maliciously overturn a display of said tinned peaches, causing considerable spoilage and alarm. You suppress a sigh. It's not exactly the crime of the century, but Mr. Abernathy is a respected, if somewhat persnickety, citizen, and property destruction, even of the tinned fruit variety, is still a breach of the peace. You carefully write out Jack's name, or at least the name he's known by, as legal names can be a surprisingly fluid concept on the frontier. Then, the alleged offense, quoting the relevant town ordinance if one exists, the date, the location, every detail matters. A misplaced name or an incorrect date could see the warrant thrown out, and Cactus Jack would be free to terrorize tinned goods with impunity. Imagine the legal arguments. Your Honor, the warrant clearly states the peach incident occurred on a Tuesday, when my client has a sworn alibi of being unconscious under a table at the saloon all day. That's your first internal chuckle of this particular task. Then there are search warrants, which require an even higher burden of proof. You can't just decide to toss someone's cabin on a hunch. You need to articulate specific reasons to believe that evidence of a particular crime will be found in a particular place. This often involves sifting through hearsay, rumor, and the occasional outright lie to find a kernel of verifiable fact. It's a delicate balance between the need to investigate and the rights of individuals. Even those individuals widely suspected of being thoroughgoing scoundrels. Summonses are another common occupant of your in-tray. These aren't for arrests, but rather official orders for someone to appear in court, perhaps as a witness, a defendant in a minor civil dispute, or, to the perennial delight of the citizenry, for jury duty. You draft one for Jedediah Long, a trapper who reportedly saw the altercation between two feuding prospectors up by Willow Creek. His testimony could be crucial. The language is formal, almost stilted. You are hereby summoned to appear before the magistrate. It's a far cry from a friendly chat, and you know Jedediah, who values his solitude above almost all else, will greet the document with the enthusiasm usually reserved for a rattlesnake in his bedroll. The sheer number of reasons people could find to drag each other into court, or be dragged themselves, sometimes feels endless. It's a good thing paper is relatively cheap, or the county would be bankrupt just from printing summonses. That's light joke number 2 for this task. Sometimes, the information you have to work with is less than ideal. A complainant might provide a written statement that looks like it was penned during an earthquake by someone using their non-dominant hand and an over-inked feather. Deciphering these hieroglyphic accounts to extract the necessary facts for a warrant requires the patience of a saint and the deductive skills of a Pinkerton detective. Historians still argue whether the often rudimentary legal training of frontier officials led to significant miscarriages of justice in the issuance and execution of warrants, or if practical common sense and a desire for basic fairness largely prevailed in most day-to-day situations. You certainly try for the latter, focusing on clarity and facts, even when the facts are buried under layers of outrage and poor grammar. A gawky or fringe tidbit from legal history is the occasional use of John Doe warrants when a suspect's name was unknown. To be valid, these often had to include a very specific description. Sometimes these descriptions were almost comically vague, a man of medium height with a shifty gaze, but occasionally they'd latch on to a truly peculiar identifying feature. A man with a pronounced limp, 3 missing fingers on his left hand, and an unfortunate habit of whistling off-key hymns. You once saw an old circular for a John Doe, also known as the Professor, distinguished by his quoting Shakespeare before robbing stagecoaches. It adds a strange, almost theatrical layer to the grim business of law enforcement. Each document is a slow, careful creation. You blot the ink meticulously to prevent smears, reread every line to check for errors, and ensure the language, while formal, is also unambiguous. These pieces of paper aren't just administrative fluff. They are instruments of power. They can deprive someone of their liberty, compel their appearance, or authorize the search of their private domain. The weight of that responsibility settles on you with each carefully formed letter. By the time the morning has truly taken hold, a small stack of these documents lies completed on your desk, warrants awaiting the JP's signature, summonses ready for delivery. Each one is a testament to the careful craft, a paper shield, and sword in the ongoing effort to maintain a semblance of order in a world that often prefers chaos. The ink on the last freshly penned warrant is barely dry, its serious legal pronouncements still hanging faintly in the air. when the creak of your office door signals a shift in the day's rhythm, the weight of formal lock crafting momentarily lifts, only to be replaced by a different, though no less demanding, kind of duty. This is the hour of the petty grievance, the domain of the disgruntled neighbor, the owner of inexplicably vanished poultry, and the citizen incensed by a perceived slight against their good name or their even better vegetable patch. You mentally brace yourself. If drafting warrants is akin to legal surgery, this next phase is more like frontier psychotherapy, with you as the unwilling, unpaid, and uncertified therapist, armed only with a pen and a ledger optimistically titled Community Concerns. Mrs. Higgins is often first. A woman whose voice could curdle milk at 50 paces and whose capacity for indignation is a local legend. Today, she's clutching what appears to be a half-eaten carrot. "Sheriff," she declares, her voice vibrating with righteous fury. "It's Elmsworth's rabbit again. Look at what it's done to my prize-winning carrot, the one destined for the county fair." You dutifully inspect the carrot. It does, indeed, bear the marks of enthusiastic, lagomorphic attention. This, in Mrs. Higgins's world, is not merely a case of a hungry bunny. It's a declaration of war by root vegetable. Your job is to nod gravely, make a note, complaint, Higgins, A versus Elmsworth, T rabbit of alleged carrot depredation, and promise to look into it. This looking into it will likely involve a very diplomatic conversation with Mr. Elmsworth, who will swear his rabbit is an angel incapable of such wanton destruction, and then a long, meaningful stare at the offending rabbit itself, which will, of course, look back with utter fluffy innocence. It's a well-established mainstream historical fact that in many frontier towns, particularly those with limited formal governance structures, the sheriff was frequently the only full-time paid public official. This made your office the de facto clearinghouse for every conceivable kind of public and private grievance, whether it fell strictly within your legal purview or not. If a dog barked too much, if a fence was an inch over a disputed line, if someone's laundry was inexplicably soiled by a passing bird with suspiciously accurate aim, the sheriff was the one to hear about it. Your job description implicitly included patient listener to the endlessly inventive symphony of human complaint. That's your first mental quip of this session. The creativity involved is truly something to behold. After Mrs. Higgins departs, somewhat mollified by the official act of your note-taking, Mr. Grumbles arrives. His name, you suspect, is less a family inheritance and more an earned title. Today, his issue is with young Billy Watson's kite. Flew right over my yard, Sheriff. Shadowed my prize tomatoes for a full 2 minutes. Deprived them of vital sunlight. And what if it had crashed? Could have flattened my beans. You diligently record this potential instance of aerial trespass and sunlight theft. You don't point out that his tomatoes are currently thriving with a vigor that suggests they could survive a minor eclipse. Instead, you promise to have a word with young Billy about respecting airspace, the diplomatic skills required for this. Part of the job are, you often think, on par with those needed to negotiate treaties between warring nations. Perhaps they should offer advanced squabble resolution courses at the Lawman Academy, if such a mythical institution even existed. The petty grievances file isn't always a physical file. Sometimes it's a specific section in a daybook, other times just a growing pile of notes that you'll later try to organize. It's a chronicle of the small-scale dramas that make up community life. Accusations of borrowed tools that were never returned, my good shovel. Sheriff, the one with the sturdy hickory handle, vanished. I know all man Hemlock eyed it last week. Complaints about noise, hooligans singing off-key down by the creek until all hours, and the endless sagas of wandering livestock. Chickens are notorious offenders, possessing a remarkable ability to end up in places they shouldn't, causing untold diplomatic incidents between neighbors. Dogs, of course, are another frequent source of contention, either for their excessive barking, their amorous attentions to a neighbor's prized poodle, or their unrefined habit of digging up flower beds. Then there are the bylaw infractions, the small tears in the fabric of municipal order. Someone dumping ashes too close to the boardwalk. A merchant whose awning extends a foot too far over the walkway. A couple of cowpokes engaging in an overly enthusiastic game of mumblety-peg right in front of the Temperance League Hall. Each requires a gentle, or sometimes not so gentle, reminder of the town ordinances, and, naturally, an entry in your records. Spoke to Silas and Jeb regarding public mumblety-pegging, advised of Ordinance 7, Section B. They were surprisingly contrite, or possibly just confused. Historians still argue whether the extensive involvement of frontier sheriffs in mediating these petty disputes ultimately enhanced community cohesion by providing a recognized, if sometimes reluctant, outlet for minor grievances, or if it simply bogged them down in trivialities that significantly diverted their time and energy from more serious law enforcement duties. Looking at the growing list of minor infractions and neighborhood squabbles on your desk, you can see both sides. Sometimes, letting people vent to an official ear prevents a molehill from becoming a mountain. Other times, you feel like you're just a highly paid, well-paid anyway, kindergarten teacher for adults. One particularly quirky tidbit you once came across in an older town's record book before your tenure was a formal complaint lodged by a woman against her neighbor for excessive and mournful playing of the concertina on Sunday afternoons, thereby casting a pall of gloom over an otherwise cheerful Sabbath. The previous sheriff had apparently mediated a solution involving specific, pre-agreed melancholy hours. You marvel at the Solomon-like wisdom that must have required. You haven't had a concertina complaint yet, but you feel it's only a matter of time. The day is young. Each complaint, no matter how small, is treated with a veneer of seriousness. You listen, you nod, you write. The very act of documenting seems to offer some comfort to the aggrieved, a sense that their troubles, however minor in the grand scheme of things, have been officially acknowledged. And sometimes, a seemingly petty complaint can be a symptom of something larger brewing. A small crack that hints at a deeper fault line in the community. So you file away Mrs. Higgins's rabbit report and Mr. Grumbles's tomato trauma, adding them to the ever-expanding archive of your paper-filled life, a testament to the endless, varied, and often baffling landscape of human nature on the frontier. The last of the morning's aggrieved citizens has departed, hopefully with their concerns addressed, or at least adequately documented to their satisfaction. The air in your office, which a moment ago was thick with tales of errant rabbits and shadowy kites, now settles into a more focused quiet. It's approaching noon, and the internal clock that governs your paper-filled days tells you it's time for another ritual, one that speaks volumes about the surprisingly structured nature of even frontier governance. The midday report for the town council. You sometimes imagine future generations picturing your entire existence as a series of dramatic standoffs and daring pursuits. They'd probably be shocked to learn about the sheer amount of time spent composing what essentially amounts to inter-office memos. This isn't a casual chat over a Cracker Barrel. It's a written account, a chronicle of your morning's endeavors, a summary of new developments, and often a subtle plea for resources or attention to persistent problems. Many newly established Western towns, eager to project an image of stability and order, quickly formed local councils or boards of trustees. These elected bodies were responsible for everything from street maintenance to the town's finances, including, critically, your budget and a general oversight of your activities. Thus, this report is your official channel of communication, your way of keeping them informed and, frankly, justifying your existence and the expenditure of precious county funds. It's accountability, 19th century style. You pull out a fresh sheet of paper, slightly less formal than that used for warrants, but still of decent quality. This isn't for the public record in the same way a warrant is, but it will be read by Councilman Davies, a man who scrutinizes every word as if searching for hidden clues to the location of Blackbeard's treasure, and Mrs. Periwinkle, the council chairwoman, whose primary concerns seem to be the moral rectitude of the town and the state of the public flower beds. You try to tailor the information accordingly. First, you summarize any significant incidents. Thankfully, this morning has been relatively free of mayhem. No bank robberies, no dramatic jailbreaks. Morning period largely characterized by routine. Administrative duties and citizen interactions. You might begin, a phrase so bland it could be weaponized as a sleep aid. You then detail any warrants issued, like the one for Cactus Jack McGee and his alleged assault on the tinned peaches. You can almost picture Councilman Davies's eyebrows rising at that one. But public order, even in the face of flying fruit, must be maintained. That's your first silent chuckle as you write, imagining their reactions to the daily docket. Next, you'll note any pertinent information from the morning's mail. That directive from the territorial capital regarding updated quarantine procedures for livestock, that goes in. The request from the sheriff in a neighboring county for assistance in locating a missing person, noted, along with your intended actions. This demonstrates you're not just dealing with local trivialities, but are connected to the wider network of law enforcement. You also give a brief update on the jail population, if there's anything noteworthy. Current occupants, 2. 1 awaiting trial for public intoxication, Jones, P. 1 serving 3 days for disturbing the peace, Smith, R. Provisions, adequate. This report is also your chance to gently, or sometimes not so gently, remind the council of ongoing issues that require their attention. Respectfully reiterate request for consideration of repairs to the boardwalk section outside the SA office. Several minor stumbles reported. A more significant injury is possible if unaddressed. You've mentioned this boardwalk for 3 weeks running. Perhaps this will be the week they allocate the minuscule sum required for a few new planks. 1 can dream. The speed at which councils address such infrastructure concerns is often, shall we say, geological. That's joke number 2. Though you keep it to yourself. Sometimes, you might include a more unusual item. Perhaps a summary of the more colorful petty grievances, phrased very diplomatically to illustrate a recurring problem. For example, if complaints about wandering pigs are reaching epidemic levels, you might note numerous citizen reports received regarding freely roaming swine. Suggest consideration of a more robust enforcement strategy for existing livestock ordinances, or perhaps the appointment of a part-time You can just imagine the debate that would spark. A quirky, though probably not historically documented, request might be for funds for something like one new, sturdier town flagpole. The the current one having been utilized as a rubbing post by a transient buffalo, resulting in a distinct and unseemly lean. You stick to the facts, mostly. Historians still argue about the degree of operational autonomy actually afforded to frontier sheriffs. Were they independent agents of the law? Or were their actions largely directed and constrained by the elected civilian oversight bodies they reported to? This midday report is a piece of that puzzle. It shows a clear line of accountability, a formal requirement to communicate and justify. While you have considerable leeway in your day-to-day enforcement decisions, the council holds the purse strings, and, ultimately, the power to question your methods or priorities. The process of drafting the report requires a different kind of mental energy than tracking finances or wording warrants. It's about summarizing, synthesizing, and presenting information in a way that is both concise and comprehensive. You choose your words with care, aiming for a tone that is respectful but firm, informative but not alarmist. It's a bit like trying to write a captivating novel where the main characters are ordinances and the plot revolves around budget lines. It's a challenge to make bureaucratic language sing or even hum pleasantly. That's your third internal jest, the art of the unexciting narrative. Once written, you reread it carefully, checking for clarity and any unintended ambiguities. This document will be scrutinized, discussed, and filed away, becoming part of the official record of your tenure as sheriff. It's a snapshot of a morning in the life of the town, seen through the lens of your office. With a final glance, you fold it neatly. Perhaps your deputy, if you have one, will deliver it. Or maybe you'll drop it off yourself during your lunchtime. Rounds, a brief errand that nonetheless underscores the interconnectedness of your role with the other nascent institutions of this frontier community. The councilman's chronicle is complete. Another 1,000 words or so of your surprisingly paper-filled existence, carefully set down, ready to take its small place in the unfolding history of the West. The midday report for the council is now a neatly folded document, perhaps already on its way to Councilman Davis's perpetually skeptical gaze. You watch your deputy, if you're fortunate enough to have one with both a reliable horse and a modicum of literacy, trot off with it. Or perhaps you've set it aside for personal delivery later. For now, another domain of your paper-filled kingdom calls, the jail. It's likely just a few sturdy cells attached to the back of your office, smelling faintly of stale bodies, disinfectant if you're lucky, and the lingering aroma of whatever passed for last night's supper for its occupants. The phrase "more forms than firearms" often springs to mind when you contemplate this aspect of your duties, because keeping track of who's in, who's out, what they ate, and whether they still have all their own teeth requires a surprising amount of meticulous documentation. Your first task might be arranging the midday meal for your current guests. This isn't a matter of simply yelling for extra biscuits at the local eatery. No, it involves paperwork. You have a small budget allocated by the county for prisoner sustenance, a fact that county governments of the 19th century were keenly aware of, as feeding prisoners was a legal responsibility and often a significant line item in their expenditures. You'll consult your meal log, noting any dietary restrictions rarely catered to, but occasionally noted with a sigh or special needs. Then you'll either arrange for food to be brought from the town's most economical and rarely most delicious cafe, or, if your setup is more rudimentary, you might even oversee the preparation of something basic yourself or by a trustee. Each meal, its cost, and its recipient are logged. Jones P. 1 portion, beans 1 biscuit. Smith R. Same. Gourmet dining, it is not. and the culinary complaints, though frequent, rarely make it into the official record. That's your first wry thought. The jailhouse suggestion box for 5-star recipes would remain perpetually empty. Then there's the constant stream of intake and release paperwork. If a new unfortunate soul was added to your collection this morning, perhaps that fellow cactus, Jack McGee. Once the warrant is served and he's apprehended amongst his beloved tinned peaches, you'll need an intake form. This document, often a pre-printed sheet if the county is organized, or a template you've painstakingly handwritten yourself, requires the prisoner's name or names, as aliases are common, the alleged offense, date and time of incarceration, and a detailed inventory of their personal effects. This last part is crucial. Every pocket knife, every worn coin, every crumpled photograph has to be noted and stored securely to prevent accusations of theft or loss upon their release. You've learned that a missing button can sometimes cause more outrage than a week in the cells. Conversely, if someone's sentence is up, or if they've miraculously made bail, a release form is required. This details the time of release, the reason sentence served, bail posted, charges dropped, and a signature confirming the return of their inventoried personal effects. You always get a signature. It's amazing how forgetful people can become about that lucky rabbit's foot once they're on the other side of the bars. Beyond the comings and goings, there's the daily prisoner log. This is a running tally of who is currently enjoying your hospitality, their sentence or trial dates, and any pertinent notes. It's a quick reference, but also a vital record for official inquiries or for when your memory, burdened by 1,000 other details, needs a prompt. Cell 1, Peter. Pocat Jones, awaiting circuit judge for trial on charges of aggravated chicken theft. Cell 2, Bartholomew Barty Higgins, serving 10 days for public nuisance, specifically attempting to teach the mayor's prize pig to yodel. Visitor logs, too, fall under your purview if you allow such interactions. Who is visiting whom, when, and for how long? It's all recorded. Not that your small-town jail is a hotbed of clandestine meetings and smuggled contraband, but procedure is procedure. And speaking of contraband, you might occasionally find some quirky items during cell inspections or prisoner searches, while dime novels loved tales of files baked into cakes. More often, it was something mundane yet forbidden, like a sharpened spoon, a hidden deck of greasy playing cards, or, as you once found, a surprisingly detailed map of the office layout, sketched on a piece of soap with a fishbone. The ingenuity could be impressive if criminally inclined. Some old jails even had meticulously detailed rule boards, covering everything from no loud singing after lights out to compulsory silence. During sheriff's midday nap, you wish that one was universal. Medical attention also generates its own paper trail. If a prisoner falls ill or sustains an injury, perhaps from a disagreement with a cellmate over the ethics of snoring, you're responsible for summoning the doctor. The doctor's visit, any prescribed treatment, and the prisoner's condition are all noted. This protects you from accusations of neglect and provides a record for the county, which will, of course, receive the bill. Historians still debate whether frontier jails primarily served as short-term holding facilities pending trial, or if they were increasingly used as instruments of punitive confinement, reflecting evolving attitudes towards crime and punishment. In the 19th century, in your small jurisdiction, it's often a mix. Some are just passing through, awaiting the circuit judge. Others are serving out short sentences for minor offenses, a brief, unpleasant taste of the law's consequences. For all of them, though, the paperwork is a constant. And then there are the requests for supplies for the jail itself. More blankets before winter sets in, kerosene for the lamps, soap a constant battle, perhaps a new lock for cell 2 after. Its occupant discovered an aptitude for picking it with a bent nail. Each request becomes a formal note to the county commissioners, another piece of paper added to the seemingly endless stream. You sometimes feel that the security of the jail relies less on the thickness of its walls and more on the sheer, impenetrable barrier of forms and logs surrounding its inmates. That's your second jest. If they ever try to escape, they'd probably get lost in the paperwork and give up dealing with the prisoners themselves. While navigating this bureaucracy requires a certain detached empathy. They might have complaints, the food, the cold, the snoring cellmate, requests for an extra blanket, a message to family, a new book if your jail is particularly enlightened, or simply a desire to talk. You listen, within reason, make notes, where appropriate, and maintain the careful balance between humanity and security. Each interaction, however brief, is a reminder of the lives caught, even temporarily. Within the cogs of the justice system, you administer a system that, from your perspective, often seems to run on ink and official forms. The last entry in the jail's meal log is made, the ink still gleaming wetly in the lamplight that supplements the afternoon sun slanting through your window. You're perhaps contemplating the relative quiet, a brief interlude in the day's symphony of paperwork and minor crises. This, of course, is precisely when the universe, with its impeccable comedic timing, decides to introduce a new tempo. It arrives not as a shout or a gunshot, but as a staccato burst of sound from down the street, the insistent, metallic chatter of the telegraph key at Mr. Henderson's little office next to the mercantile. Even if you can't hear it directly, the sound often precedes its messenger, young Willie, the telegraph boy whose arrival at your door usually means something urgent is afoot. A few minutes later, sure enough, Willie appears, slightly out of breath, clutching a small buff-colored slip of paper. "Telegram for you, Sheriff," he chirps, already halfway back out the door, eager to return to his own less consequential pursuits. The telegraph. In a world governed by the slow creep of mail coaches and the even slower pace of rumor, the telegraph is lightning in a bottle, a thin wire humming with the urgent whispers of a rapidly connecting nation. It's a mainstream historical fact that the completion of the transcontinental telegraph in 1861, followed by the swift expansion of its network, revolutionized communication. News that once took weeks or months to cross the country could now arrive in hours, sometimes minutes, fundamentally altering commerce, news, dissemination, and, importantly for you, law enforcement. You take the flimsy slip. Telegrams always feel uniquely important, partly because of their cost. Every word was a calculated expense, leading to a distinct, often comically abrupt, style of communication. Full stops were literally the word stop. Articles like A and the were luxurious extravagances, often omitted. Reading one is like deciphering a secret code, a linguistic shorthand born of necessity and thrift. You can almost hear the telegraph. Operator Henderson, a man who probably knows more of the town's secrets than the parson and the doctor combined, mentally tallying the word count as he transcribed it. That's your first fleeting thought. Henderson's ears must be the best informed in the county. Today's message is brief. As expected, Sheriff Red Gulch, stop posse trailing, 3 men bank robbery, Pine Ridge, stop headed your direction, Gray. Gelding sorrel mare, black stallion stop. Consider armed dangerous stop. Hold, if apprehended advise. Immediately stop. Sheriff J. Edwards Pine Ridge, stop suddenly. The mundane paperwork of meal logs and minor bylaw infractions seems very distant. This is immediate, potentially dangerous, and requires your recorded attention in multiple ways. First, the slip itself is a record. You'll carefully note the date and time of its receipt, perhaps in a dedicated telegraph logbook or within your main daily journal. This small piece of paper, so easily lost, could become a crucial piece of evidence or justification later. You smooth it out, feeling the slightly rough texture of the cheap paper, the embossed letters from the telegraph. Sounder, or perhaps Henderson's neat, hurried handwriting if he took it down by ear. Next, you consider the content. 3 armed and dangerous men implicated in a bank robbery, possibly heading your way. Your mind races through a quick assessment. Your available manpower likely just you and your deputy. If you have one, the layout of the county, likely routes they might take. This isn't just information, it's a call to action. You might need to alert your deputy, organize a patrol, or at the very least, put the word out discreetly to be on the lookout. It's a sudden jolt from the quiet rhythm of office work into the realm of active pursuit and potential confrontation. The calm of your paper-strewn sanctuary is instantly charged with a new tension. Then there's the matter of a reply. Sheriff Edwards in Pine Ridge will be anxiously awaiting confirmation or news. Drafting a telegraphic reply requires the same expensive brevity. Received stop will watch all trails, stop, advise developments, stop, sheriff your name, Red Gulch. STOP. You'll write this out. Count the words, every single one, and then either send Willie back with it to Henderson, or prepare to take it over yourself. And, of course, this outgoing message also needs to be logged, and the cost of sending. It will eventually find its way into your financial ledgers. Even urgent whispers on wires have a price tag. Historians still debate the extent to which the advent of the telegraph tangibly improved the apprehension rates of criminals across different jurisdictions, while it undoubtedly sped up the dissemination of information. Its effectiveness could be hampered by issues like limited manpower in remote areas, lack of immediate pursuit capability, or even interjurisdictional rivalries where cooperation wasn't always seamless. Still, for a sheriff in a relatively isolated town, a telegraph line was a vital link, a way to overcome the tyranny of distance, at least for urgent matters. Sometimes, the terse nature of telegrams led to misunderstandings. There are many anecdotal, quirky stories from the period of messages being so condensed for economy that their meaning became hilariously or tragically garbled. Send 3 and 4pence. AM going to a dance was supposedly a misread of send reinforcements. AM going to advance. While likely apocryphal, it highlights the potential pitfalls. You always try to be clear, even if it costs an extra word or two. Trying to decipher an overly compressed message, especially one concerning dangerous outlaws, feels like playing a very high-stakes game of fill-in-the-blanks. That's your second mental chuckle. Despite the seriousness of the current message, the arrival of this particular telegram effectively reshuffles your priorities for the rest of the day, possibly the next few days. Those petty grievances, the half-finished reports, they all recede in importance. The immediate concern is the potential arrival of these fugitives. You'll need to inform your deputy, perhaps subtly alert a few trusted townsfolk, the stable owner, the blacksmith, to keep an eye out for unfamiliar horses matching the descriptions. The recorded attention here isn't just about paper, It's about mental alertness, strategic thinking, and a readiness to shift from clerk to active. Lawman, at a moment's notice, the telegraph wire has hummed, and your paper-filled day has just been dramatically rewritten. The urgent message from Pine Ridge has been logged, a reply dispatched, and your mind is now actively scanning the peripheries of your awareness for any sign of those three fugitives. But while a part of you is on heightened alert, the relentless rhythm of your office duties continues. The telegraph may have brought a jolt of adrenaline, but it doesn't magically clear the backlog of other essential paper-filled tasks. One such responsibility, often a direct consequence of arrests or investigations, is the careful cataloguing of seized property and evidence. This isn't just a matter of tossing found items into a dusty corner. It's a meticulous process, another cornerstone of the justice you're sworn to uphold, built yet again. On paper, you turn your attention to a sturdy wooden box kept under lock and key in a secure corner of your office, your evidence locker, though it's a rather grand term for what is, essentially, a well-made crate. Perhaps it's a repurposed strongbox from a defunct stage line, or a cabinet you bartered for from the local carpenter. Inside, carefully organized, or as organized as circumstances permit, are the tangible remnants of past troubles. A rust pit revolver taken from a belligerent drunk, a set of oddly marked dice confiscated from a backgammon game, a faded silk scarf found at the scene of a reported theft, still holding the faint, unidentifiable scent of its former owner. Each item tells a story, or at least a fragment of one, and each needs its own paper trail. Let's say earlier in the week, you arrested a drifter suspected of pilfering tools from the blacksmith's shop. The recovered tools, a distinctive hammer, with a chipped handle, a set of calipers, a specialized rasp, are now before you. Each one must be individually catalogued. You take out your evidence log, another ledger filled with neat columns. For each item, you record a description. One hammer, claw type, wooden handle, hickory. Appears to be approximately 14 inches in length. Distinctive chip on left side of handle near head. Maker's mark illegible due to wear. You note the date and time of seizure, the location it was found, for example, in suspect's saddlebag, the case it pertains to theft. S. Blackwood versus John Shifty Smith, and your own initials as the seizing officer. You then assign it an evidence number, say, case 2304, item A. A small paper tag with this number and a brief description is then carefully tied to the hammer with a piece of string. You sometimes feel like a museum curator for a very depressing, exhibit. That's your first quiet jest. The Museum of Minor Misdeeds. This process is repeated for every single item. The calipers, the rasp, even the burlap sack they were carried in. While sophisticated forensic science, as we know it, was still in its infancy in the late 19th century, the legal system was increasingly recognizing the importance of physical evidence. Basic procedures for collection and preservation were becoming more common, even on the frontier, as tangible proof could often speak louder than a witness whose memory might fade or whose motives might be questioned. Your meticulous records here could mean the difference between a conviction and an acquittal, or the rightful return of property to its owner. Sometimes, the items you have to catalogue are less straightforward. A bundle of letters written in a barely legible scrawl, found in the pocket of an apprehended swindler. You'd have to note the number of letters, perhaps a general description of their content if it seems relevant, and you can decipher it without spending a week doing so. or counterfeit coins you'd describe their appearance. Their suspected metallic composition, often lead or pewter, poorly disguised, and the quantity. Historians still debate how consistently the chain of custody for evidence was maintained in frontier jurisdictions. While the ideal was clear to track who handled the evidence from seizure to courtroom, the practicalities of a one-man or one-man and deputy operation often meant the chain was very short, primarily involving you. Your detailed notes are your best defense against any later claims of tampering or misidentification. And then there are the truly quirky items. You might recall a case from a neighboring county where the sheriff had to catalog one glass eye, suspected to have been dislodged during an altercation. Or perhaps you yourself once had to log a bundle of herbal remedies confiscated from a traveling quack, with labels promising to cure everything from baldness to a broken heart. These often required a certain creativity in description. Approximately 1 pint of viscous, dark green liquid, smelling strongly of swamp mud and regret. Your evidence locker could sometimes resemble a lost property office for a particularly eccentric circus. The smells alone could be an adventure, especially if dealing with items like soiled clothing or, heaven forbid, perishable evidence like a suspected poisoned pie, which would need to be described in minute detail before it transformed into an entirely new and fuzzier exhibit. The process of cataloging is slow and methodical. It requires concentration and a careful hand. You might use a magnifying glass to look for distinguishing marks on a weapon or a piece of jewelry. You handle each item with a degree of professional detachment, even if it's something grim. Like a weapon used in a violent crime, though, you strive to keep such details PG-213 in your mental retelling for your listeners. The pen scratches. Across the ledger, the tags are tied, and the items are placed back into the secure box, each one a silent testament to some breach of the peace, some moment of human failing. This isn't just about locking things away. It's about creating a reliable record that can be referred to weeks, months, or even years later. Witnesses forget, stories change, but a carefully catalogued piece of evidence remains. Your state-of-the-art evidence storage, that sturdy box, is a crucial, if unglamorous, part of your office. Its contents, and the paperwork that describes them, are a quiet but powerful aspect of the law you represent. As you lock the box again, you add another small stack of completed forms to your day's growing collection. Each sheet a thread in the complex tapestry of frontier justice, woven with ink, patience, and an unwavering attention to detail. The evidence box is once again secured, its silent contents locked away, and you turn your attention from the aftermath of misdeeds to the more proactive, if equally paper-laden, task of regulating the town's enterprises and activities through the issuance of permits and licenses. This is where your role shifts slightly from enforcer to administrator, a gatekeeper of sorts, ensuring that those who wish to conduct business or hold certain privileges within the bounds of Redemption Gulch, or whatever your particular patch is named, do so with the official sanction of the town council, processed, of course, through your office. It's another way your paper-filled days contribute to the delicate, often precarious, balance of order on the frontier. Perhaps Mr. Silas Blackwood, the blacksmith whose tools were recently pilfered and hopefully recovered thanks to your diligent cataloging in the previous hour, now stands before you for a different reason. He intends to expand his smithy, adding a small section for selling manufactured goods he plans to import from St. Louis. This, according to Town Ordinance Number 12, subsection C, requires an amended business license, and so another form is brought forth. You can almost hear the collective sigh of the trees that were felled to produce the sheer volume of official paper your job demands. The application is a relatively simple document, asking for the nature of the business, the proposed changes, and a declaration that all activities will be conducted in a manner not liable to cause public alarm or undue effluvia. That last part was added after the unfortunate incident with Tanner Joe's experimental hide-curing solution. You review Silas's application. He's a known quantity, a skilled artisan, unlikely to cause undue effluvia, experimental or otherwise. The fee, a modest $2, is collected and dutifully noted in the revenue ledger. That familiar tome from Section 3 makes another guest appearance. It's a well-known historical fact that the licensing of businesses, particularly high or potentially troublesome ones like saloons, was a common and absolutely vital source of revenue for many fledgling frontier municipalities. These fees helped pay for your salary, for the very ink in your pen, and for the slow, incremental growth of civic infrastructure. Once the fee is paid and logged, you prepare the actual license. This might be a pre-printed certificate, purchased in bulk from a stationer back east, with blank spaces for you to fill in the pertinent details. License is hereby granted to Silas Blackwood to operate a blacksmith and purveyor of fine goods at No. 14 Main Street. Or, if your town is particularly rustic, the license might be entirely handwritten by you, perhaps with a slightly more elaborate script than your usual workaday scrawl to give it an air of officialdom. You sign it with your name and title, and if your office boasts such a modern marvel, you might even emboss it with the town seal, a small satisfying thud as metal presses onto paper, lending a tangible weight to the abstract concept of legal permission. The artistic quality of these documents varied wildly. Some were quite plain, while others, especially for prestigious businesses, might have had surprisingly ornate borders, as if a fancy font could guarantee propriety. That's your first internal smile, judging a business by its licenses. Calligraphy. Liquor licenses are, naturally, a more complex and often contentious affair. They bring in significant revenue, true, but they also come with a host of potential problems. Applications for saloon licenses are scrutinized more closely, or at least they're supposed to be. You check if the applicant has any outstanding warrants, if their proposed location meets the town's often loosely defined zoning requirements, generally meaning not too close to the church or the schoolmarm's house. The rigorous background check might consist of you asking around a bit. Anyone know this fella Bartholomew Breezemiller? Says he wants to open a new watering hole. Seems affable. Then there are permits for less common activities. Perhaps a traveling preacher wishes to hold a tent revival on the edge of town. A permit for a public gathering might be required, mainly to ensure it doesn't obstruct a public thoroughfare or descend into a brawl. You might even deal with firearms permits, though this varied greatly. While owning a firearm for self-defense was common and largely unregulated, some towns required permits for carrying a concealed weapon or for businesses to sell firearms and ammunition, partly as a control measure, partly as another revenue stream. Historians still debate whether the primary driver behind the proliferation of local licensing ordinances in frontier towns was a genuine desire for public order and safety, or the more pragmatic, pressing need to generate municipal revenue. Looking at the town's lean budget, you suspect it's a healthy serving of both. The rules provide a framework for coexistence, and the fees keep the lights on, metaphorically speaking, as your office probably still relies on kerosene. Occasionally, you encounter requests for truly quirky licenses. Some towns, in their efforts to control what they considered undesirable elements or to simply raise more funds, might have required licenses for itinerant musicians, phrenologists, or even professors of pugilism. You once heard of a town that briefly tried to license cats in a misguided attempt to control the rodent population by ensuring only officially sanctioned mousers were on the job. It didn't last, as cats, then as now, are notoriously resistant to bureaucracy. Thankfully, your town council hasn't yet ventured into feline licensing, though Mrs. Higgins did once suggest a permit system for rabbits, with mandatory carrot-tithing. Dealing with those operating without a license is another chapter in your paper-filled saga. A polite but firm visit, a written warning citing the relevant ordinance, and, if that fails, a summons. It's all part of the gentle, or sometimes not so gentle, nudging of the populace towards a state of somewhat regulated commerce and activity. You try to be fair, to explain the necessity of the rules, even as you sometimes privately question the logic behind a particularly convoluted one. You often wonder at the creative interpretations some licensees have of their permissions. The saloon owner who swore his quiet Sunday musicale didn't violate the no revelry on the Sabbath clause, despite the enthusiastic banjo and off-key chorus emanating from within. By the end of this particular block of your day, a few new licenses have been issued, fees collected, and another set of entries made in the appropriate logbooks. Each piece of paper, from the initial application to the final certificate, represents a small act of civic negotiation, an agreement between an individual and the community, brokered by you and your ever-present pen. The town, you hope, is a little more orderly, its finances a tiny bit healthier, and your permits and propriety file just a little bit thicker. The last license certificate has been carefully blotted and handed over, its fee recorded, and the faint scent of official ink and hopeful enterprise momentarily freshens the air in your office. But the town's financial ecosystem doesn't run on business license fees alone. Now, you brace yourself for a task that, unlike issuing permits for potentially prosperous ventures, is almost guaranteed to win you no friends. Dealing with taxes. Yes, even in the supposedly wild and free West, the taxman cometh, and as sheriff. You often play a supporting and deeply unpopular role in his arrival. It's another chapter in the Uncharted Domesticity of your office, where the ledger and the law book overshadow the six-shooter in daily use. Your direct role might vary. More established counties might have a dedicated tax assessor and collector, but even then, you're often the one called upon when civility fails and obligations are ignored. Your desk might now hold a list from the county treasurer, a roll of delinquent taxpayers, individuals and businesses who have, for reasons ranging from genuine hardship to stubborn recalcitrance, failed to contribute their share to the public coffers. Each name on that list represents a potentially awkward and occasionally hostile interaction. And, of course, more paperwork. You might start by drafting formal delinquency notices. These aren't chatty reminders. They are official, legally couched documents stating the amount owed, the deadline for payment, and the potential consequences of further non-payment. To Mr. Ebenezer Scrooge, a surprisingly common name, or at least disposition, when it comes to taxes, you might pen, "You are hereby notified of outstanding property taxes in the sum of $3.50 for the current fiscal year." The language is dry, impersonal, designed to convey authority rather than warmth. You make a copy for your records, always a copy, before preparing to serve the original. The universal joy that such notices bring is, you reflect, one of life's great constants, right up there with death and, well, taxes. That's your first wry, internal observation of this task. Serving these notices is a job in itself. It means a walk through town, or perhaps a ride out to a remote homestead, to hand-deliver these unwelcome missives. You'll encounter a predictable range of reactions. The resigned sigh, the elaborate tale of woe, often involving a sick mule, a failed crop, and a sudden, inexplicable case of amnesia regarding financial obligations. The outright denial, taxes. What taxes? This land is mine, free and clear. And occasionally, the slammed door. You listen patiently, explain the situation calmly, and ensure the notice is properly delivered, making a note in your logbook of the date, time, and method of service. It's like being the bearer of bad news, but on a repeating schedule. Property. Taxes are the main source of contention, assessments on land, buildings, and sometimes even livestock. Poll taxes, a flat fee per adult male in some jurisdictions, are also a source of grumbling, seen by many as unfair. The accuracy of assessments can be a major issue. How do you value a piece of land when its potential for mining or agriculture is still largely unknown, or when its primary crop appears to be rocks and stubborn weeds? You've heard tell of assessors whose methods seem to involve more guesswork and personal preference than scientific evaluation, leading to some truly bewildering tax bills. My land is taxed higher than Old Man Hemlock's, and his has a creek. All mine has is a view of his slightly less rocky land. It's a mainstream historical fact that tax delinquency was a significant problem on the frontier. Money was often scarce, and a spirit of fierce independence sometimes translated into resistance against any form of government levy. When notices and warnings failed, sheriffs were often empowered by law to conduct tax sales. This meant seizing property, whether it was a parcel of land, a few head of cattle, or even household goods, and auctioning it off to the highest bidder to recover the unpaid taxes. This is, by far, the most odious part of your tax-related duties, an action that could turn neighbors into bitter enemies and cement your reputation in some quarters as a heartless agent of an oppressive government. You avoid it whenever possible, preferring to use every ounce of persuasion and patience to encourage voluntary compliance. Historians still debate whether frontier taxation systems, often reliant on fluctuating property values and enforced by local officials like you, were truly equitable, or if they disproportionately burdened new settlers, smallholders, or those simply down on their luck. Looking at the faces of some of the people you have to serve notices to, you can certainly see how it could feel like the latter. Sometimes, you encounter quirky methods of tax avoidance or unique local tax laws. You might hear rumors of ranchers temporarily losing a portion of their herd in some hidden canyon around assessment time, only for the cattle to miraculously reappear once the assessor has moved on. Some communities had road taxes which could be paid either in cash or through a specified number of days of labor improving local roads. This, naturally, created its own paperwork nightmare, tracking who had shoveled their share of dirt versus who had stumped up the coin. You thank your lucky stars your county hasn't adopted that particular scheme yet, though the state of some of the outlying roads makes you wonder if it might be an improvement. The excuses for non-payment are often memorable. One fellow swore a flock of particularly intelligent locusts had eaten his entire cash savings, leaving only the tax bill untouched as a taunting reminder. Another claimed his money was bewitched and would turn to dust if exposed to a government official. You document these explanations with a straight face, though it sometimes requires an almost superhuman effort of will. Suspect claims funds unavailable due to targeted insectile larceny. Your report to the treasurer would be a masterpiece of deadpan delivery. By the end of this round of collector's calculations, you'll have a sheaf of served notices, a few promises of imminent payment to be taken with a hefty grain of salt, and a renewed appreciation for the general unpopularity of your official duties. Each interaction, each piece of paper generated, underscores the delicate tightrope you walk between upholding the county's financial necessities and maintaining some semblance of goodwill within the community you are sworn to protect, even from themselves, and their understandable aversion to parting with their hard-earned cash. The last disgruntled taxpayer has retreated, muttering about the unfairness of it all, and you've filed away your copies of the delinquency notices. Another unpopular duty ticked off the seemingly endless list. As the dust settles, both literally and figuratively, your thoughts might turn to your deputy, if you're fortunate enough to have one. In some sparsely populated or particularly frugal counties, the sheriff is a lone sentinel. But assuming you have a man, or perhaps, in very rare instances, a woman wearing a deputy's star, you'll know that this ostensibly helpful addition to your workforce comes with its own unique constellation of paperwork. It's one of the great ironies of command. Delegating tasks often means more administrative work for you, not less. Let's call your deputy Shorty. Even if he's 6'3", nicknames on the frontier rarely adhere to logic. Shorty is, let's say, enthusiastic and well-meaning, but perhaps not overly gifted in the art of meticulous record-keeping. This morning, before he set out on his assigned patrol of the southern county line, where there have been whispers of rustlers again, you had to prepare his directive. This wasn't just a casual, go look around, Shorty. It was a written assignment. Deputy S. Shorty Malone. Patrol route, south, along Willow Creek to the Old Bar M Ranch. Then west towards Flat Top Mesa. Objective, observe for any unusual activity. Specifically, unbranded cattle or signs of transient camps. Engage with settlers. Note any concerns. Serve. Attached summons on Jedediah Stone. Overdue jury duty. Report findings by end of day. You keep a copy, of course. This directive is crucial for accountability, for ensuring patrols are systematic, and for your own peace of mind, knowing there's a record of his assigned duties. The formal process of deputization itself is a significant act, often involving the swearing of an oath and the bestowing of a badge. Once sworn, a deputy sheriff holds genuine legal authority, empowered to make arrests, serve legal papers, and enforce the peace, acting as a direct extension of your office and your authority. This isn't a responsibility you grant lightly, and it's why their actions and the documentation thereof are so important. And then there are the reports you expect from Shorty. When he returns, hopefully not covered in mud or arrow holes, he'll need to provide an account of his patrol. If Shorty is like many deputies, his verbal report might be vivid and anecdotal. Saw a hawk. Sheriff, big as a barn door. And old Mrs. Peterson says her prize rooster's gone missing, suspects a fox, or possibly aliens. But translating that into a useful written document often falls to you, or requires your heavy editorial hand. Observed large hawk. Mrs. Peterson reported missing rooster, cause undetermined. You'll learn to filter, to extract the pertinent facts from the enthusiastic embellishments. The legibility of some deputies' handwriting could make ancient hieroglyphs look like a children's picture book. That's your first internal sigh, deciphering deputy dispatches beyond patrol reports. There are other administrative tendrils. If Shorty serves that summons on Jedediah Stone, he needs to fill out a return of service form, noting the date, time, and method of delivery. If he makes an arrest in your absence, he initiates the intake paperwork, which you'll later review and countersign. If he uses county-supplied ammunition during target practice or, heaven forbid, a real engagement that needs to be logged against your office's supplies, his salary, however meager, needs to be recorded in your financial ledgers, with days worked carefully tracked. Even the badge and handcuffs issued to him are noted in an equipment log. It all adds up to a surprisingly thick file labeled Deputy Operations, or something equally official sounding. Historians still debate the general caliber and training of deputy sheriffs on the frontier. Some were undoubtedly capable, experienced lawmen who provided invaluable assistance. Others may have been political appointees, friends of a county commissioner, or simply the only men willing to take on a dangerous and poorly paid job. Their competence, or lack thereof, directly impacted your workload and your reputation. A good deputy was worth his weight in gold. A bad one could be a walking disaster, creating more problems and paperwork than he solved. Sometimes, the tasks assigned to deputies could be rather quirky, beyond patrols and serving papers. A deputy might be sent to investigate a strange noise complaint at the old cemetery, usually a loose gate or a nervous gravedigger, or to persuade the Henderson boys to stop practicing their yodeling so close to the widow's alms. You once heard of a sheriff in a neighboring territory who had to deputize nearly every able-bodied man in town to form a posse to chase a particularly bold gang of train robbers. The subsequent paperwork involved in logging who was deputy, what actions they took, and if they expected any payment for their service or their horses apparently took him weeks to sort out. The thought of such a bureaucratic avalanche makes you appreciate Shorty's occasional grammatical eccentricities. The challenge, of course, is that you are ultimately responsible for your deputy's actions. His mistakes are your mistakes. If he oversteps his authority, misinterprets an order, or files an incomplete report, the buck stops with you. This means reviewing his work, providing guidance, and sometimes offering gentle correction. You might find yourself explaining, for the third time, why suspect looked shifty is not sufficient probable cause for an arrest, or why his expense claim for 1-1 calming sarsaparilla after stressful encounter with badger is unlikely to be approved by the county treasurer. The creative excuses for uncompleted tasks or questionable expenses can be a source of mild amusement or intense frustration, depending on the day. That's your second jest. The deputy's dictionary of official-sounding justifications. Yet, despite the added administrative burden, having a deputy, assuming he's mostly competent, is a significant advantage. It extends your reach, allows you to be in two places at once, metaphorically speaking, and provides crucial backup in dangerous situations. The ability to delegate means that not every single piece of paper, every minor complaint, every summons lands solely on your desk. It just means you now have papers about other people's papers. As you make a note to remind Shorty about the proper way to fill out an evidence tag, you reflect that being a manager is perhaps the most unexpected and paper-intensive part of being a Wild West sheriff. The directives for Deputy Shorty are filed, his anticipated and likely creatively written report awaited. For now, your attention shifts from managing your one-man auxiliary force to another equally demanding and often more frustrating, aspect of your investigative duties, recording detailed witness statements. This is where your patience, your diplomatic skills, and your dwindling supply of ink are truly put to the test. Whether it's a major crime or a minor but persistent trouble, the words of those who saw, heard, or experienced something are vital. Threads in the fabric of any investigation. Each one must be carefully coaxed out, listened to, and, most importantly, written down. Imagine Mrs. Peterson, owner of the recently deceased or possibly abducted by aliens, if Shorty's earlier informal report is to be believed, prize rooster now sits opposite your desk. She's distraught, voluble, and convinced her neighbor, old Farmer McGregor, who has a long-standing feud with her over a disputed fence line and a shared apple tree, is the feathered fiend. Your task is to gently guide her through her account, sifting the kernels of potential fact from the chaff of emotional accusation and neighborhood animosity. This isn't a quick chat. It's a careful excavation of memory, and every significant detail needs to be immortalized in ink. You'll start by trying to make her comfortable, offering a glass of water, perhaps a sympathetic nod. Then the questions begin. Open. At first, tell me in your own words, Mrs. Peterson, what happened. And as she speaks, you write and write and write. You try to capture her words as accurately as possible, even the digressions about Mick Gregor's suspiciously well-fed cat, or the time he borrowed her pie tin and returned it with a dent. These asides might seem irrelevant, but sometimes they contain a clue, or at least paint a fuller picture of the relationships involved. It's a mainstream historical fact that in 19th century courtrooms, with forensic science still in its very early stages, eyewitness testimony was paramount. The words you're painstakingly recording now could become the linchpin of a future prosecution, or the key to resolving a bitter dispute before it escalates. The sheer variety of witnesses you encounter is a study in human nature. There's the reluctant witness, eyes downcast, mumbling responses, clearly afraid of involvement or retribution. With them, you need to be patient, reassuring, emphasizing the importance of their information. Then there's the overly enthusiastic witness, eager to tell you not only what they saw, but what they think it all means, often complete with elaborate theories that would make a dime novelist blush. Your challenge here is to gently steer them back to the observable facts. Yes, Mr. Higgins, the theory about a conspiracy of one-legged chicken thieves is noted. But could you just describe the man you saw leaving the henhouse? That's your first silent chuckle. The amateur detectives are always the most entertaining. Recording these statements verbatim, or as close to it as humanly possible, is a marathon for your writing hand. Your fingers will cramp, your inkwell will need frequent replenishment, and the stack of filled pages will grow. You might use pre-lined foolscap, or simply the blank pages of a sturdy ledger designated as your testimonies and troubles log. This log isn't just for formal witness statements related to crimes. It's also where you might record more nebulous troubles. Reports of suspicious characters seen lurking near the bank after hours. Ongoing complaints about a series of minor vandalisms, or even a citizen's uneasy feeling about a newcomer to town. These might not lead to immediate action, but a detailed record can reveal patterns over time or become crucial if a more serious incident occurs. Historians and legal scholars continue to debate the inherent reliability of eyewitness accounts. From the 19th century, particularly given that statements were often taken without standardized procedures and with little understanding of how memory can be influenced by suggestion or trauma. You do your best to be objective, to record faithfully, noting any obvious inconsistencies or points where the witness seems unsure. But your primary role here is as a scribe, a conduit for their story. You might note the witness's demeanor in the margin, appeared nervous or spoke with conviction. Sometimes the circumstances under which you take a statement are far from ideal. You might find yourself squatting in the dust by a corral, taking notes from a ranch hand who witnessed cattle rustling, the wind whipping at your paper. Or perhaps you're in a dimly lit saloon, trying to get a coherent account from someone whose memory is clouded by cheap whiskey. The sounds of a poorly tuned piano clashing with their slurred narrative. You once had to take a statement from a man who claimed a highwayman had been scared off by his wife's banjo playing. The quirky details that emerge are endless. One witness swore they could identify a horse thief by the unique way he sneezed like a startled goose. Sheriff, very distinctive. Such claims, while colorful, require careful, non-judgmental recording. Once the witness has told their tale, you might read it back to them, ensuring it accurately reflects what they said. If they agree, you'll ask them to sign it, adding their mark if they cannot write their name. This signature, this affirmation, lends a crucial layer of authenticity to the document. The amount of paper and ink consumed in this process alone could probably supply a small schoolhouse for a month. That's your second internal jest. You're single-handedly keeping the stationery suppliers in business. The final challenge is sifting through these narratives. Some witnesses are honest but mistaken. Some are deliberately misleading. Some embellish for dramatic effect. Your office, filled with these first-hand accounts, becomes an archive of human perception, fallibility, and occasional, surprising clarity. Each statement is a piece of a larger puzzle, one you must try to assemble with care and discernment. As Mrs. Peterson finally finishes her tale of woe and signs her statement, with a flourish that speaks of her conviction in McGregor's guilt, you file it away, your hand aching slightly, your mind already turning to how this new narrative fits, or doesn't, with the other scraps of information you've gathered. The trouble's log grows, one inked page at a time. The last witness, Mrs. Peterson with her rooster lament, has long since departed. Her signed statement now nestled amongst the other narratives in your testimonies and troubles log. Outside your office window, the sharp edges of the afternoon have softened into the bruised purples and dusty oranges of a western dusk. The sounds of Redemption Gulch are changing too. The clang of the blacksmith's hammer has given way to the distant plink of a saloon piano, and the murmur of voices from townsfolk heading home or seeking evening diversions. For you, however, the day isn't quite over. Before you can even think of dousing the lamp or seeking your own Spartan bunk, there's one final ritual: dusk's document review. It's time to survey the mountain of paperwork that has accumulated, a testament to your surprisingly paper-filled, decidedly uncinematic day. You lean back in your chair for a moment, the wood creaking in protest, and survey your desk. It looks like a stationer's shop exploded. There's the morning's mail, with its official directives and pleas from afar, now annotated with your notes. The financial ledgers, hopefully balanced, or at least wrestled into temporary submission. Copies of the warrants and summonses you painstakingly drafted. The informal, often scribbled, notes from the petty grievances file, each one a tiny human drama. There's your copy of the midday report to the town council, a monument to bureaucratic necessity. The jail logs, detailing who's in, who's out, and what they had for lunch. The flimsy slip of that urgent telegraph from Pine Ridge still carrying a faint charge of immediacy. Tags and entries from cataloging evidence, stubs and records from issued licenses, copies of tax delinquency notices, directives for Deputy Shorty, and perhaps even his initial, hastily scrawled report if he's returned. And, of course, the freshly inked witness statements. It's a veritable Everest of official documentation, and you, brave mountaineer of municipal minutiae, must ascend it one last time before nightfall. You sometimes think the paper itself is breeding, threatening to spill off the desk and take over the entire office. That's your first tired jest of the evening. The purpose of this review isn't just to tidy up, though that's a part of it. It's to ensure completeness, to catch any errors or omissions, and critically, to identify any outstanding actions that need to carry over to the morrow. It's a mental consolidation of the day, a way to draw lines under tasks completed and flag those still pending. It's a little-known mainstream historical fact that, unlike their counterparts in larger, more established city police forces, most frontier sheriffs operated without any dedicated clerical support. You weren't just the chief lawman. You were the chief clerk, scribe, archivist, and corresponding secretary, all rolled into one. This end-of-day review was your quality control and your planning session. You start systematically, perhaps with the mail. Did every letter requiring a response get one drafted, or at least noted for action tomorrow? You move to the financial records. Are all fees collected today properly entered? Any expenditures logged with receipts attached? Then, the legal documents. Are the copies of warrants properly filed? Have all served summonses been noted with their return of service details? You glance over the witness statements again, perhaps making a marginal note where a point needs further clarification or cross-referencing with another piece of information. Compare Peterson's timeline with Mick Gregor's known whereabouts, if ascertainable without causing further uproar. This is where you might find those small, satisfying connections or frustrating discrepancies. A name mentioned in a witness statement might match a name on a wanted poster that arrived in the morning mail. An item described in a petty theft complaint might sound suspiciously like something logged in the evidence catalog from an unrelated arrest. It's quiet detective work, done not with a magnifying glass and a deerstalker hat, but with a weary mind and a flickering oil lamp. The exciting nightlife of a Wild West sheriff sorting through papers by lamplight while the coyotes howl their own mournful tunes. That's your second sarcastic thought. Historians still debate how the significant administrative load borne by frontier sheriffs impacted their proactive law enforcement capabilities. Did all this paperwork keep you tethered to your desk, reacting to events rather than anticipating or preventing them? Or was this meticulous record-keeping itself a form of proactive policing, creating a web of information that, however slowly, helped to impose order and accountability? As you sift through these documents, you can feel the pull of both arguments. Every hour spent with a pen is an hour not spent on patrol, yet every accurately recorded detail is a potential tool for justice. You might have your own quirky system for this review. Perhaps you sort papers into different stacks using old cigar boxes, meticulously labeled urgent action, awaiting deputy, file when sanity returns. Or maybe you simply go through the day's chronology, reliving each paper-based interaction. There might be a small, almost perverse satisfaction in finding a particularly messy page from your notes and transcribing it neatly into a formal log, bringing order to chaos, one sentence at a time. You might even find an entry that makes you pause. A reminder of a small success, a dispute mediated, a lost item returned, a license issued that might genuinely help someone prosper. These are the quiet rewards, rarely acknowledged by anyone but yourself. As you work, the office grows cooler. The lamp sputters occasionally, and you trim the wick. The scent of warm kerosene mingling with the ever-present aroma of old paper and ink. The town outside is largely quiet now. This is your solitary kingdom, an empire of official forms and recorded deeds. When the review is finally done, when every paper has been scrutinized, noted, and placed in its designated pile for tomorrow's filing or action, there's a sense of weary accomplishment. The mountain hasn't been conquered. It will be just as high tomorrow, fed by a fresh avalanche of daily demands. But it has been navigated, for today at least. The ultimate reward for a hard day's paperwork, the certain knowledge of more paperwork to come. That's your third, and perhaps most resigned, jest of the evening. But for now, the desk is as clear as it's going to get. The great, sprawling continent of paperwork on your desk has finally been mapped, surveyed, and organized into neat, manageable territories, at least for tonight. The lamplight, now your sole companion in the quiet office, casts long, dancing shadows, making the familiar space seem a little more mysterious, a little more weary, just like its occupant. Before you can truly call an end to this long, paper-intensive day, there are the final rituals of closing up the last official entries, and the securing of both documents and dominion. You might make one last entry in the main financial ledger, perhaps an overlooked expenditure for lamp oil, or a quick tally of the day's collected fees, just to ensure the numbers whisper a quiet goodnight to each other without any unresolved arguments. Closing the books for the day, even if they'll spring open with fresh demands at dawn, brings a small, almost imperceptible sense of completion. You dip your pen a final time, the scratch on the paper sounding unusually loud in the stillness. The ink, like your energy, is running low. Then comes the crucial task of securing the most sensitive documents, the ledgers themselves, holding the fiscal secrets of the county, the evidence log with its inventory of misdeeds, any significant cash that hasn't yet been transferred to the town's bank, if it has one, or a more secure county depository. These items are carefully gathered. A mainstream historical fact is that while larger businesses might boast impressive iron safes, a frontier sheriff's office often made do with more rudimentary security. Your safe might be a sturdy, iron-banded strongbox tucked under your desk, or a deep, lockable drawer that offers more of a deterrent to casual curiosity than a determined thief. You place the ledgers inside, the weight of them a familiar burden. You sometimes imagine that if these papers were left unsecured, they'd sprout legs and run amok through the town, causing bureaucratic chaos, telling tales out of school. That's your first weary jest of the final hour. Once the critical papers are stowed, you turn your attention to the jail, if it currently has any unwilling guests. You do a final walkthrough. The air here is always a little colder, a little more laden with the scent of confinement. You check the cell doors, ensuring the locks are secure. Are the prisoners settled? Any last-minute, reasonable requests, a blanket, a word about the morning. You're not their innkeeper, but a basic level of security and minimal humanity is part of the job. Satisfied that all is as it should be, or as good as it can be in a small-town jail, you retreat to the main office. Now, for the office itself. You ensure the windows are latched, though the quality of frontier window latches means a determined gust of wind might still offer a stiff challenge. Your high-tech security system likely consists of a sturdy door, a decent lock, and the general reluctance of most townsfolk to break into the sheriff's office. A reluctance built more on respect for the badge, or fear of the man wearing it, than the impregnability of the structure. You might have a quirky personal ritual for this moment, something unique to your routine. Perhaps you always place your hat on a specific peg, or tap the telegraph key twice as a silent goodnight to the wires. Some old-timers, lawmen included, were known to keep an unconventional persuader by the door. Not a firearm necessarily, but perhaps a weighted cane or an oversized, conveniently placed inkwell for any unexpected late-night callers with ill intent. Historians still debate the psychological impact on frontier sheriffs of their relentless, multifaceted responsibilities, especially when, as was often the case, their living quarters were attached to or part of the office itself. There was little separation between public duty and private life, a constant immersion in the town's troubles. This blurring of lines could lead to a pervasive weariness, a sense that the job was never truly done. You turned down the main lamp, leaving perhaps just one small burner flickering low, a tiny beacon against the dark, more for your own return in the pre-dawn hours than for any intruder. The shadows deepen, and the stacks of neatly piled paperwork on your desk, tomorrow's tasks already waiting, seem to huddle together in the gloom. You take your key, a heavy iron thing, and step outside, pulling the door shut behind you. The click of the lock engaging echoes briefly in the night air. Peace and quiet at last. Or, at least, until some cowpoke decides that midnight is the perfect time to practice his off-key serenades, or a dog starts an argument with the moon. That's your final, resigned jest to the departing day. You stand for a moment on the boardwalk, breathing in the cool night air. The vast, star-dusted sky of the west arches overhead, a silent, indifferent witness to the small dramas and endless paperwork of your domain. The town of Redemption Gulch is mostly asleep, a collection of dark shapes and occasional, distant lights. Your day, a marathon of ink and order, is finally complete. And now, as the last echo of your footsteps fades on the wooden planks, and the weight of the day, finally, begins to lift from your shoulders, it's time for our story to draw to a close as well. The ledgers are put away, the inkwells capped, the quiet hum of the telegraph wire, the only voice now speaking in the deep of night across the vast, sleeping land. The worries of Redemption Gulch, its citizens, and its ever-vigilant sheriff will rest, just for a little while, beneath the silent, watchful stars. Allow the gentle cadence of this frontier night to settle around you. Let the imaginary scent of cool desert air and distant wood smoke soothe your mind. The small, persistent details of the day, the endless lists and careful entries, can now recede, replaced by a sense of calm and the deep, restorative quiet that follows a long day's work diligently done. There is a peace in this imagined stillness, a quiet dignity in the routine, a comfort in the knowledge that even in a world often remembered for its wildness, there were those who steadfastly toiled, pen in hand, to weave the very fabric of community, one document, one entry, one carefully considered word at a time. Feel the tension ease from your own shoulders. Let your breathing deepen and allow yourself to drift, just as the last light fades from the sheriff's window. The paperwork is done, the town is safe, and the vast expanse of the night invites you into its embrace. Rest now.